In 1968, when Harlem was a city of both power and chaos, Johnny the Razor Cole, a seasoned hitman known for his cold efficiency, made a decision that would seal his fate. He thought a $100K bounty on Bumpy Johnson's head would solve his problems, a quick payday that would set him up for life. But what he didn't know was that he was walking straight into the lion's den. He had no idea that Bumpy Johnson, the legend of Harlem, would not only retaliate, but would make him pay the price in a way that would leave him naked and insane, lost in the very streets he thought he could dominate. Johnny the Razor Cole was a man of reputation. He was quick with a gun, efficient with his hits, and ruthless with anyone who stood in his way. A mercenary for hire, Johnny had worked for various crime families, but no matter where he went, he always followed one simple rule: survival at all costs. Money was his only true motivation. He didn't care about loyalty, honor, or justice. He cared about one thing: getting paid. Johnny's reputation made him untouchable. He had killed countless men, and no one had ever been able to touch him, not even the law. He was a ghost, someone who moved through the world unnoticed until it was too late. And because of that, he believed he could take on anyone, including Bumpy Johnson. But Bumpy was different. Bumpy wasn't just another criminal in the system. He was a legend, a man who ruled Harlem through respect and a powerful sense of honor. To betray Bumpy wasn't just about money. It was about crossing a moral line, and that line was one Johnny Cole had no idea he had just crossed. Bumpy was known for being a protector of Harlem, a man who cared for his people and his family. But make no mistake, Bumpy also had a darker side. Anyone who challenged him, anyone who tried to use violence or betrayal as a way to take his throne, would suffer consequences that no money could fix. Johnny was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The 100K bounty Johnny Cole had accepted wasn't just a job, it was a death sentence. He had been hired by a rival gang who believed that eliminating Bumpy Johnson would give them control of Harlem streets. But Johnny was too arrogant, too blinded by the promise of money to understand the weight of what he was about to do. By taking the job, Johnny wasn't just attacking a powerful man, he was attacking Harlem's heart. Bumpy's empire wasn't just about crime, it was about respect. And when someone violated that respect, it wasn't just Bumpy who would retaliate, it was the entire community. Johnny had no idea what he had unleashed. What made the betrayal worse was that Johnny had chosen to strike at the heart of Bumpy's family. He didn't just aim to kill the man, he planned to destroy everything Bumpy held dear. In doing so, he made Bumpy Johnson's family, and by extension, Harlem itself, a target. And in doing so, Johnny was not only betraying Bumpy, he was betraying everything that Harlem stood for. This would not just be another job. Bumpy Johnson was about to make an example of him, and Johnny Cole's life would never be the same again. It started when Johnny the Razor Cole made his move, underestimating the magnitude of the target he had taken. The plan was simple: ambush Bumpy Johnson during one of his usual nighttime walks through Harlem, a man who had long been a symbol of power in the community. Johnny knew the route, the timing, and the perfect moment to strike. It was supposed to be clean, a quick, decisive hit to secure the bounty and disappear into the night with $100,000. Bumpy Johnson, however, was no stranger to danger. He had lived through countless assassination attempts, outsmarting those who tried to kill him, and leaving behind a trail of would-be killers too terrified to try again. Johnny Cole, equipped with a silenced pistol and a plan, waited in the shadows. He knew that Bumpy was walking toward a nearby diner, where he often stopped to talk to the locals. The moment Bumpy rounded the corner, Johnny planned to make his move. But what Johnny didn't expect was the sudden shift in the air, a feeling that something wasn't right. Just as Bumpy approached the corner, a sudden noise, a crash, disrupted his focus. Johnny's instincts kicked in, but it was already too late. Bumpy had already seen him. Bumpy's sharp eyes locked onto Johnny's position just as Johnny moved to fire. The hitman was faster, but Bumpy was smarter. In a blur of motion, Bumpy ducked and grabbed the nearest object, a metal trash can lid, and hurled it at Johnny. It struck Johnny's gun arm, knocking the weapon from his hand. Bumpy's next move was instinctive, stepping forward with the grace of someone who had lived a lifetime of close calls. With a swift, calculated punch to Johnny's gut, Bumpy knocked the wind out of the hitman, sending him stumbling backward. Johnny, stunned and struggling to regain his composure, reached for his backup weapon, but Bumpy was already on him, his hand grabbing Johnny's collar and lifting him off the ground. "You don't get to touch me or my family ever, Johnny." Bumpy's voice was cold, but it was a calm fury, the kind that sent shivers down anyone's spine. Johnny tried to push him off, but he couldn't. He was powerless against the legend. For a brief moment, Johnny realized how far out of his depth he was. The 100K bounty seemed like a joke now. What was money compared to the sheer power and respect that Bumpy Johnson commanded? Johnny's vision blurred, his heartbeat quickening, as Bumpy's hand tightened around his throat. The hitman was in the middle of his last struggle when Bumpy dropped him to the ground. "I'll make sure you learn your lesson, Johnny," Bumpy said, stepping back and wiping the sweat from his brow. "You thought this was just about a price, but you made a mistake, one you'll regret." Word of the attack spread like wildfire through Harlem. Johnny the Razor Cole, the hitman who had dared to take on Bumpy Johnson, had failed in his attempt. But it wasn't just about the botched hit, it was about the deeper betrayal Johnny had committed. Bumpy, as always, was calm in the face of the betrayal. He wasn't angry, he wasn't in a rush, but he knew exactly how to handle this. Later that night, Teddy, one of Bumpy's most trusted men, came to him with the news that Johnny Cole had fled the scene, leaving Harlem behind and seeking refuge with his associates who had paid him the bounty money. "He's on the run, boss," Teddy said, "but we know where he's hiding." Bumpy leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him. "I don't care where he's hiding. I care about what happens when you betray me. You think he's the only one who's going to pay the price for this?" Teddy, seeing the quiet rage building in Bumpy's eyes, nodded. "He won't get away with it, not after what he did." Bumpy's response was calm but chilling. "In the next 7 days, Johnny Cole will know what it means to mess with me. And if he thinks he's escaping his fate, then he's already lost." Bumpy's men, loyal to him without question, set to work. This wasn't going to be just about physical retribution. It was going to be about humiliation, about making Johnny beg for mercy in a way he would never forget. Bumpy wasn't just going to kill Johnny. He was going to take everything from him, his mind, his sanity, his sense of control. As the days passed, Johnny Cole felt the weight of the world closing in on him. He had thought that framing Bumpy Johnson for the armed robbery would be the final blow to take the legend down, but instead, he had unleashed something far worse. Hiding in a rundown apartment, Johnny spent the next few days looking over his shoulder, constantly on edge. Bumpy Johnson's name seemed to echo in every corner of his mind. The streets of Harlem whispered about the hitman's failure, about how he had tried to take on a legend and ended up nothing more than a failed assassin. Johnny thought he was safe. He thought he could lie low, that the streets would forget about him. But the reality was far worse. Bumpy's crew was everywhere, tightening the noose around Johnny's neck without him even knowing it. As the 7th day approached, Johnny's fear grew. The hitman was no longer the predator. He was the prey. And he had no idea how far Bumpy's vengeance would stretch. Bumpy, with his signature calm and precision, watched it all unfold. He wasn't going to rush justice. Johnny Cole's fate would be sealed on Bumpy's terms, not his. By the 7th day, Bumpy's plan was in motion. Johnny, exhausted and paranoid, found himself walking the streets of Harlem late at night, desperate to escape the pressure. But every corner he turned seemed to bring him closer to Bumpy's grip. There was no escaping the inevitable. Bumpy's men had found him, cornered him in a quiet alley, and delivered him to Bumpy with effortless precision. Johnny, now shivering and soaked in sweat, was dragged in front of Bumpy Johnson once again. It was 7 days later, and the streets of Harlem had grown eerily quiet. Johnny the Razor Cole, now a shadow of the man he had once been, found himself at the mercy of Bumpy Johnson. The hitman's nerves were frayed, his mind unraveling with each passing hour. The weight of his betrayal, the failure of his mission, and the fear of Bumpy's retribution had slowly chipped away at his sanity. Johnny had thought he could escape, that his connections would keep him safe. But the streets of Harlem belonged to Bumpy Johnson, and there was no hiding from that truth. As Johnny walked through the dark alley where he had once prowled as a predator, Bumpy's crew silently emerged from the shadows. They moved like phantoms, surrounding him without a sound. Johnny tried to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. The fear had consumed him, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, trembling uncontrollably. Then, out of the darkness, Bumpy Johnson stepped forward. Johnny looked up, his eyes wild with panic. "Bumpy, please. Please, I didn't mean it. It was a job, that's all. I thought I was just doing my work, just trying to survive. Please don't." Bumpy's cold, steady gaze silenced him. There was no empathy in Bumpy's eyes, just the undeniable presence of a man who had lived by his own code for too long to allow betrayal to slide by unnoticed. Bumpy had built his empire not with violence alone, but with honor. And Johnny had violated that honor in the worst way possible. "You made your choice, Johnny," Bumpy said quietly, his voice calm but laced with a threat that sent a chill down Johnny's spine. "And now you're going to live with the consequences." Bumpy's men pulled Johnny to his feet, forcing him to stand. Johnny could hardly hold himself up, his legs shaking beneath him, his mind fractured from the constant fear. Bumpy was standing inches away, his presence suffocating. "You thought you could kill me and walk away untouched. You thought you could take everything from me for $1, Bumpy continued, his voice low, but carrying the weight of a man who had lived through countless betrayals and had never been brought to his knees. Johnny opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was paralyzed by fear. "That was your mistake, Johnny. You never understood that when you mess with me, you mess with more than just one man. You mess with Harlem." The next moments passed in eerie silence. Bumpy, calm and controlled, walked a slow circle around Johnny, who was now on his knees, trembling and gasping for breath. His sweat mixed with the cold night air, the reality of his situation crashing down on him with each passing second. And then Bumpy delivered the final blow, not with his hands, but with his words. "The streets have their own way of dealing with people like you. You thought you were untouchable, but you're just another man who thought he could take what wasn't his. And for that, you're going to learn a lesson that no amount of money can save you from." Johnny's desperate sobs filled the air, but Bumpy Johnson remained still, unwavering. The silence that followed was thick. Bumpy had already made his move. His men, without a word, poured concrete around Johnny's feet, quickly and efficiently, until it reached his waist. Johnny screamed, realizing too late that he had been trapped, his body immobilized, his fate sealed in a way he could never escape. But Bumpy wasn't finished. He wanted Johnny to understand the full extent of the betrayal, to feel every ounce of fear and helplessness he had put the people of Harlem through. In that moment, Johnny realized the price of his actions. Bumpy wasn't going to kill him immediately. No, that would be too easy. Instead, he was going to make Johnny suffer, mentally, physically, and emotionally, until the hitman could no longer hold on to his sanity. For the next few hours, Johnny's screams filled the night air as he struggled against the weight of the concrete slowly encasing his body. But there was no escape. Bumpy watched, calm and collected, as Johnny's panic escalated, and then the madness began. Johnny's mind, already on the brink, began to unravel as the concrete hardened around him. The fear, the desperation, and the realization that there was no way out took their toll. By the time the concrete had fully encased him, Johnny's screams had turned to wild, incoherent babble. His eyes were wide with terror, and his face was frozen in an expression of pure madness. Bumpy Johnson didn't need to watch any longer. The hitman who had once been a predator had been reduced to a broken man, consumed by the very fear and chaos he had inflicted on others. Bumpy turned his back, leaving the streets to take care of the rest. There was no need for more violence. Johnny Cole had already been dealt with. His mind, his sanity, had been broken by the very consequences of his actions. The next morning, Johnny the Razor Cole was found naked and insane, stumbling through the streets of Harlem, his mind lost in a haze of fear and panic. His body was covered in cuts, bruises, and the remnants of the concrete that had once trapped him. He had no recollection of what had happened, only a deep, unshakable terror. The people of Harlem, who had once feared Johnny, now saw him as a cautionary tale. He had been a man who thought he could betray a legend, but instead, he had been consumed by the very streets he had tried to control. His reputation as the hitman who had crossed Bumpy Johnson was now nothing more than a broken man's madness. For Bumpy, the justice had been swift. and it had been served in the most fitting way possible. Johnny Cole, the man who thought he could betray Harlem's king, had lost everything, not just his life, but his very mind. As for Bumpy, his reputation remained untarnished. His legacy grew even more solidified, not just as a man of power, but as a man who demanded respect. And in the streets of Harlem, there was a new understanding. Betrayal had a price, and no one crossed Bumpy Johnson without paying it. What would you do if someone tried to betray you for money? Would you let them walk away, or would you make them understand the consequences, just like Bumpy Johnson did? If this story hit you, smash that subscribe button. We're telling the Bumpy Johnson story's history forgot, the moments that made him a legend, the code that made him untouchable. Drop a like if you think Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem, and in the comments, what would you have done if you were Johnny Cole? More legendary stories coming soon. Don't miss it.